Thank you so much for the opportunity. Um, I just want to have a much broader, presentation about some of the things that we are doing in as far as cultural heritage in general, but also there will be a level of bias, towards archaeological heritage because I'm an archaeologist. So there has to be some bias, somewhere. Um, Broadly speaking, I just want to talk about SANParks and what I think it has to offer in the context of my presentation. And broadly, also in terms of preserving cultural heritage, presenting cultural heritage to our visitors, and to conclude by some of the ideas that I have as far as archaeological heritage is concerned within the national parks, and some of the activities that are already taking place at this very moment. Steph spoke about the public good mandate, on Tuesday, and I think therefore, basing my initial argument on that, it is worth it to say that we have people who come to some of our pristine natural state, landscape, purely because they want to feel rejuvenated, and purely because they want to feel spiritually attached, to themselves and to the nature, and that's part of the service that we offer, as SANParks. But I will add that in addition to that, there are those who come to our national parks purely because they want to travel back in the past, to visit some of the cultural landscapes that we have, to visit some of the cultural heritage sites that we have, and learn about the past. And one colleague was making a remark, not long ago when I was at the Kruger National Park, that one of the advantages of a national park is that most of the archaeological heritage that has been destroyed elsewhere outside protected areas is still largely intact because not much development has taken place, and therefore we provide that avenue for those who are really interested in learning about the past to come into our national parks. So I would like to think, therefore, that cultural heritage has got a significant role to play in aiding SANParks to serve that particular mandate of being an entity that serves the communities that visit our national parks very well. But I think what is of a significant limitation here is that we have very limited offerings in as far as cultural heritage is concerned. And this, to me, has to do with the history of the organization, and it's not just unique, to SANParks, because there are other similar entities around the country which are faced with the same historical background as SANParks, in the sense that historically they've been mostly biased towards the conservation of biodiversity. That is how they were established, and that is how they've always done things. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Azemvelo at one time was called Natal Parks Board. That was an official name. And if you also look at the history of SANParks, you see, even from the naming of the entity, that it was very much biased, towards biodiversity, and therefore, as a result, the role towards cultural heritage sector, as far as I'm concerned, has largely been minimal, even though to the advantage of SANParks, one has seen change over time. And let me just add here as well, to give an example and illustrate this point further. If you look at Azemvelo in KwaZulu-Natal, they are a management authority for the Ukahlamba Drakensberg, which became a World Heritage Site back in 2001. And yet, from then up until today, they have no one in the entity who is a specialist in heritage matters. And yet, if you look at the inscription of Ukahlamba, one will argue that the cultural heritage was a much stronger component that led to the inscription, more than any other aspects that you can talk about from a biodiversity point of view and so on. And that just goes to tell you the difficulties, there are for historically, biased organization to actually transform going forward. Well, they can have an excuse because there were some politics in the province after they tried to advertise the position. So, but that's a story for another day. So my view here is that preserving cultural heritage within SANParks should not just be about identifying sites and then decide how best can we manage this for what I will call the so-called future generations. And it's intentional why I've got the single quote marks there, because then we can say we have so many national parks. Each and every park manager has got a list of cultural heritage sites within their parks, so we are doing a good job. For me, that's just the beginning. There is more that needs to be done going forward. I see it more as a combination of factors. So, number one, we need to critically review the databases that we have, that list the different cultural heritage sites within each and every one of our national parks. Because there are many weaknesses, in terms of how those databases, came about. And it is as of that reason why, as the unit, cultural heritage unit there is, we have been on the mandate to make sure that on each and every financial year, we do at least 2 park assessments. Now, there's only 2 of us who are doing that, so you can understand why, we cannot really do more than that, per financial year. And just to give you an example, in the financial year 2021 to 2022, we did Marakele and Mountain Zebra national parks. During this particular financial year, we've already done Ohabis Falls. We just finished a report, about 2 weeks ago, and we will be doing, Kamdebo. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. I almost said the Kamdebo earlier on. National parks. But we have decided, just as of this week, to include Bondebok, because I'm told it's a very small park that we will be able to do within our limited resources, even in this particular financial year. So we will be able to do those ones. And that is just a foundation, in a way. Because, as I said earlier on, for me, that is just the beginning. Now, to increase our level of impact, we will be doing, West Coast and Algalas National Parks, hopefully within this financial year as well, because of the additional resources that we were able to secure, which will therefore mean that within this financial year alone, we could, at the end of it, say we have done 5 national parks rather than 2, which will be a good, output going forward. Now, but we have come across some few challenges, just as part of lessons that we can reflect on based on what we have done so far. Number one, you get a list in one national park, and it's got 144 cultural heritage sites, and you say, oh wow, okay, there's a lot in this park. But when you start going through, site by site, you realize that some sites are not really sites, and they should never have been added in the first place. So, for example, what we call a single occurrence. So I go to a particular area and I'm picking up a stone tool, scraper, hand axe, or whatever it could be. Then I record that as a site when I just found one piece. Or I find an upper grindstone or lower grindstone, then I call it a site. It's just one piece. And I guess, if I'm someone subcontracted to do that work, I want as many sites as possible to have a good report with lots of photographs, and then you see so many sites that I've recorded, and it's a problem. So some of the places that we have been, we had to be very, stringent in terms of editing, such lists, because it also, adds a challenge, to park managers, who, through the auditing processes, sometimes get asked to take people to the auditors to this specific sites. and you hear stories about what really happens. This is one of the sites that was added, and for most, unless you are more intelligent than me, you will probably just sing a pack of stones. If you are seeing more than that, then you are very intelligent. Because when I went to this site, I just saw piles of stones, and it's a heritage site. And I'm like, what is this? How did it become a site? Now, when you start listening to the narratives, all it was an enclosure to catch troublesome animals which were eating the farmers' cows, and that's it. But it became a heritage site. How? I have no idea. This is not even a technology of maybe 1700s, and then to say, it's an old technology and trying to find a spin, to make it a heritage site. It's a much more recent phenomenon, and on a land that we exchanged with the farmer, and it has now become, part of the national park, and the farmer was given a different piece of land. It's not worthy of being added, to the heritage site and having someone, spend their effort in a day to say they are managing this as a heritage site. So it's not just about reviewing and amending the list. I also think what is also equally important is that we need to identify, sites that can potentially, be allowed, for visitation, so that when our visitors come to the national parks, they don't just look for the elephant where there are elephants or lions where they are, but they also see a greater variety of what we have within the national parks. So just briefly, some of the activities that we are doing. Out of the mountain zebra, survey that we did, we have come to an agreement that two of the rock art sites that are there will have a wooden deck, built and installed, so that people can safely, visit those particular, rock art sites. We are opening 5 rock art sites at Mapungubwe, for tourism, purposes. At Ohabis, we are going to build a display case made of glass, so that people can have a general appreciation around the public area just before the office building. They can have an appreciation of the cultural heritage, that is there in an area, and not just focus on the falls and the history of the falls in terms of water flow and all of that. Now, out of Tsitsikamma, where unfortunately a shell maiden side was damaged because of the constructing activity. One of the things that we are in discussing about is having a display within the restaurant area, that will tell a story about shell maidens in the area, and therefore indirectly, talk about the history of human occupation, in that particular landscape. We are also setting up, smaller interpretation centers around the different national parks. Not long ago, just a few weeks ago, a new display in collaboration with Honor Rangers was opened at Mount Chikumbu. We are doing a same project at Litaba, which is one of the sites that is currently being excavated in Kruger, and was very much highly publicized because of its significance recently. What we don't want is a situation whereby when visitors go to this one rock art site and Mountain Zebra, someone has to hold them like that because there's a possibility that they can fall down and down into the river. That fence looks like it's still there. It's not there. The poles have stood the test of time. But this is exactly why we think there should be a boardwalk so that people can go closer and appreciate, the rock art. This is some of the rock art that you find there. And for me, as someone with a very keen interest in Southern African rock art, what is particular about these particular paintings is that it is not common to find cattle paintings, especially in that particular locality. So you get an opportunity for a guide to give some nuances that can only be given in that particular location and not anywhere else in per se. This is what we are doing in Mapungubwe. This is rock art sites, which, as part of the mitigation, we've done a study. I hope no one is a specialist in dealing with elephants here, because they might tell me soon that I'm talking nonsense. But what we are trying to do here is we've laid a geotextile to protect the archaeological deposit. But we have also laid those stone there with an idea of preventing elephants from coming too close to the rock art, because when they do, they rub themselves against the paintings and then in the process damage the paintings. I'm hoping the elephants will not pick those stones and throw them away, but they will find it discomfortable to walk over and therefore not come too close to the signs. Just, I know I'm out of time, just quickly. This is the hard work that you see people doing, collecting stones and making sure that we can do this pilot study and see if it works going forward. In Okhabis, we don't want people to just focus on the falls, but we also want them to know about the archaeological heritage in the area. That's that particular picture. This is a picture of a shell median site that was partially damaged, at Tsitsigama as a result of the construction activities. But in conclusion, I'm a scholar, and for me, I might be a bureaucrat within SANParks, but I'm also a researcher at heart. And I think it's very critical that we intentionally, target specific, research agenda within SANParks as far as archaeological heritage is concerned, because there are many gaps within our national parks. We have so much knowledge about what is happening in the north in as far as Iron Age studies, for example, is concerned. And yet, when you look at our arid regions, there's not much archaeological research down there. If you look at our coastal areas, equally, there is not much archaeological activities, that is being conducted. Because I will say SANParks has been more reactive when it comes to archaeological research. We wait for researchers to come to us and apply, for authorization. I want to change that around, whereby we put some funds towards research activities, and we invite researchers to focus on specific locations so that we can broaden our understanding of archaeological knowledge throughout our national parks. I'm really out of time, so let me just stop here and not go any further. Thank you.